I'm on my way to my speaking test. I arrived here about 40 minutes early so that I could just take a little walk and clear my mind and mentally go over what I want to say, and also listen to a Danish podcast so I can have the language fresh in my head. And now I have about 25 minutes until my test, so I'm going to head over to my language school, sit down for a bit, look over my notes, and then take my test. Fingers crossed it goes well. I passed. Feels like a huge weight is off my shoulders. I just went to a cafe and celebrated with a cinnamon roll and a matcha latte. And now I'm gonna go home and take a nap because, of course, I didn't get any sleep. I was so nervous. But now I can. Halloween is in 1 week. Back when I lived in the US, I would be seeing Halloween displays in store windows, neighborhoods bursting with Halloween decorations, aisles and aisles of Halloween costumes in the grocery stores, and Halloween candy. Back when I lived in Atlanta, I would have definitely been planning a trip to Netherworld Haunted House, one of the scariest Halloween attractions in the world. TV stations in the US are usually marathoning Halloween movies, Hocus Pocus, Friday the 13th, and of course, the movie Halloween. Coworkers and friends of mine are hosting Halloween parties, and on Halloween night in the US, the streets will be flooded with trick-or-treaters. Here in Denmark, there's signs of Halloween, but it's not on as grand a scale as it is in the US. I see pumpkins for sale in the supermarket. I see some Halloween costumes in the stores. The other day when I was in IKEA, I saw this little display of Halloween decorations for your home and actually purchased a little something for our home to help us get into the Halloween spirit. But when I moved here a little over a year ago, I very quickly realized that Halloween here in Denmark is not as popular as it is in the US. When I was a child growing up in the US, Halloween was pretty major. Every year on Halloween, we'd get dressed up in our Halloween costumes and go to school. And our teachers would often decorate their classrooms for Halloween. Maybe we'd watch some fun Halloween movies in class, and the teachers would play Halloween music. Parents would bring in candy for the class or cupcakes that were decorated for Halloween. And we'd have a big party all day in school. And then after school, most kids would go trick-or-treating. Now, my little brother and I were not allowed to go trick-or-treating. I think my parents just didn't think it was very safe. And I also think the fact that my mother was not American and grew up with parents who weren't American and didn't really make Halloween a big deal. Halloween was just not a major celebration in our household. But I do remember some instances when my mother would take us to a party that a friend of hers was throwing, and we'd all get dressed up in costumes and go to those. And also as a child, we belonged to a church, a pretty progressive church, I would have to say, because many churches shun Halloween. Our church in particular chose to have a Halloween event for families called Hallelujah Night. And all the parents who weren't so wild about taking their children trick-or-treating could still bring their kids somewhere to have fun on Halloween. And as a child, I remember the days leading up to Halloween. The Disney Channel was always playing some kid-friendly, spooky movies like Hocus Pocus, or there was this 90s movie called Under Wraps that was about a mummy. There was a fun movie called Mom's Got a Date with a Vampire. And a major Halloween staple for me as a child was the Goosebumps series. I don't know if anyone in this part of the world has ever heard of the Goosebumps series, but it was huge with kids that grew up in the 90s. It was a series of books that were also made into very low budget, but in my opinion, very high quality mini movies. And I was obsessed And as a kid, I read every Goosebumps book I could get my hands on, and I watched all the movies. And these stories were made for children, but they were legitimately scary. And they were definitely a gateway drug for me into the whole horror genre. So yeah, as a kid, Halloween for me was definitely about costumes and games and creepy books and movies. And then as a young adult in the US, it was not too far from the Halloween scenes in the movie Mean Girls. That movie captured it pretty perfectly. It was just about looking hot and partying. And yeah, we had some fun times, but I honestly would have rather gone to a haunted house in comfortable, warm clothing. But I think those years are just a rite of passage. And to be honest, Halloween was more fun as a child than it was during my college years. Now fast forwarding to my last few years in the US, we were living in Atlanta. The neighborhood right next to where we lived had massive Halloween displays. I guess everyone in that neighborhood agreed to just go all out for Halloween. And so everyone in the surrounding neighborhoods would just convene in this one neighborhood. And it was the best Halloween atmosphere. And so the past few years, since my husband and I don't have any children to take trick-or-treating, we just dressed our dogs in their Halloween costumes. And yes, my dogs have Halloween costumes. They're the same every year. And we'd walk them around this neighborhood and just take in the Halloween atmosphere. And once the dogs got tired, we would all go home and watch a scary movie. And those were some of my best Halloweens as an adult. But now that we're living in Denmark, we have this opportunity to create new Halloween traditions. Last year was my first time celebrating Halloween outside of the US, and I didn't know what to expect. And it turned out to be a spectacular Halloween, mainly because my in-laws came to visit us here in Copenhagen. My husband's brother, his wife, and their 2 sons. And we all went to Tivoli, which is an amusement park in the heart of Copenhagen. The team that's responsible for decorating Tivoli for Halloween did an incredible job. I was blown away. We went to the haunted house in Tivoli, and then we came back here and carved some pumpkins and made jack-o'-lanterns. So it actually turned out to be pretty similar to a Halloween one would celebrate in America, minus the trick-or-treating. But this year, it's just gonna be my husband and I and the dogs. Halloween day is gonna be more low-key, but I've got a few plans. The reason I have Halloween on the mind is because tomorrow we're gonna be doing the best thing you can do around the Halloween season here in Copenhagen, and I'm really excited.